Welcome to Fabric Monday. Today we'll talk about OneLake Security, which is still in preview. Yes, OneLake Security is a feature in preview, and because that it needs to work side by side with other security methods until it goes GA. Let's analyze the access map in Fabric so we can have a better view about how the OneLake Security fits with other technologies. We have the OneLake. The OneLake is where our data is stored. Then we have the warehouse, which stores the data in OneLake, and we have the lakehouse, which stores the data in OneLake. Both of them retrieve the data from the OneLake using the identity of the owner of these objects, owner of the lakehouse, owner of the warehouse. Then on the lakehouse we have a SQL endpoint. The SQL endpoint accesses the lakehouse and gives us an endpoint to make SQL queries. Besides that, we have semantic model. A semantic model can connect to the SQL endpoint. The connection is done using a connection object. Can connect to a warehouse using a connection object, and can connect to OneLake also using connection object. The question is, where is the security in this access map? The security is located first in the warehouse. Warehouse is responsible for the security. On the SQL endpoint is another point responsible for the security. And we have the security in the semantic models. The semantic models are also responsible for the security. In this way, you may notice that each semantic model accessing our data passes through two levels of security. We have one level of security inside the semantic model itself and another level of security on the object it accesses, either a SQL endpoint or a warehouse. The exception is the semantic model using direct link to OneLake. It doesn't pass by any other object and access directly the OneLake. In this case, we don't have two security layers, we only have one security layer, which is the semantic model. Mind that we are talking about before the OneLake security, or if the OneLake security is disabled. Another important detail in this map for us to note is the connection object. The semantic models use the connection object to connect to the second object, and this is very important because the connection object has security configurations. It defines how the first security layer will connect to the second security layer. Let's see how it happens. Here we have a window to create a new connection. We have many configurations in this window. This first part is used for the import mode. Import mode runs is scheduled. We schedule the refresh of the semantic model. In this case, there is no end user. The developer needs to specify a credential which will be used to access the data. That's how the import mode works. Then we have direct link and direct query. How will they work? There is a configuration there. We can choose to enable or disable this configuration. What's the difference? The difference is, will the end user identity be sent to the second level of security, or will it use the identity defined by the developer, the same used on the import mode? The developer has the power to enable or disable this option. If the developer enables this option, then the identity of the end user passes to the second layer, and all the security will be done on the second layer. But if the developer chooses to not check this box, then what goes to the second layer is the identity the developer selected. The end user identity never reaches the second layer. In this case, the end user has only the semantic model security. The security checks are cut by the developer. When we use OneLake Security, it's important to keep this option checked. We need to keep this option checked so the end user identity goes directly to the OneLake and it's checked in OneLake. unless you have other scenarios, different scenarios, where it makes sense to send only the identity selected by the developer. You need to plan your security scenario for this. We are back in our access map. Let's see how the OneLake Security fits on this map. OneLake Security will be another security layer in the OneLake. In this way, the semantic model using direct link to OneLake will have two security layers. Will not stay with only one anymore. We'll have two security layers. The semantic model itself and the OneLake. The warehouse doesn't support the OneLake security. It means the warehouse continues sending to the OneLake only the identity of the owner of the warehouse. The warehouse is a store point for the security. The security is managed by the warehouse. The lakehouse, on the other hand, has configurations to manage this. The SQL endpoint got a new configuration exactly to manage where the security point will be. The SQL endpoint can be configured to be the security layer. In this way, the semantic models access the SQL endpoint, have the security checked by the SQL endpoint, or it can be bypassed. We can change the security layer and move the security layer to OneLake, so the SQL endpoint will not be the security layer anymore. The security layer goes to the OneLake. When we use this configuration, the identity which is passed to the OneLake is not the identity of the owner of the lakehouse anymore. It's the identity of the caller. Even if the semantic model is calling through the SQL endpoint, we can make the identity of the caller, the end user, to reach the OneLake and use the OneLake security, either for the semantic model using direct link over OneLake or for the SQL endpoint. Let's see this configuration, let's see what it is. So we go in settings of the SQL endpoint. It's not the settings of the lakehouse, it's the settings of the SQL endpoint. And then we go to data access mode. In data access mode, we have the option to select use OneLake security for tables. This is not the default. The SQL endpoint continues to work in the same way it always worked. But if we choose to make this change, we select the option use OneLake security. When we select the option to use OneLake security, all the security configuration in the SQL endpoint are dropped, and the end user identity will be passed directly to the OneLake. All the security will be managed directly by the OneLake. One important point for us to note in relation to all these are the workspace permissions. Any workspace permission above the view permission overrides the OneLake security. The OneLake security is only applied for workspace permissions on view or no permissions. Let's see the OneLake security working. Here we have a lakehouse with some tables. Let's enable the OneLake security. When I click this button for the first time, it advises me that the OneLake security is turned off, and if I decide to turn on, it can be reverted later. So continue, turn on OneLake security. OneLake security is turned on, and it already opened the window to configure the roles for the OneLake security. It recommends us to already configure some roles. Roles define what permission the user will have in our lakehouse. We have a default reader role by default, and this role grants read permission. So I need to add new roles. New, let's make a role for full control. Read and write on all data. That's it. This role issues full control on all data. Create role. So whenever I would like to give full control to a user, I can set the user in this role. Let's create other roles. Read employees. I'll give permission to read the employees table. Then I can use the select data. The select data opens the button browse lakehouse, and I can select what in the lakehouse the user will be able to access. The employee table. Add data. On the lower part of the screen, I have a preview of the role. Here I'm seeing a data preview showing to me the tables available for the users in this row. And here I can add members to this row. I will add one of my other accounts. This account. Okay. That's it. I have the permissions and the member. Let's create a row. I can create different rows, for example, read customers. Let's select the data, browse Lakehouse, and select the table customers. I will add a different account to this row, and that's it. The row is created. In this way, I'm configuring the rows and the users who have permissions to these rows. Of course, I can link groups to the rows as well. I can define groups in Enter ID and link these groups to the rows as well. Let's take a look how will be the access of the user to this Lakehouse after this configuration. Here I'm accessing Fabric with a different account. The account I gave permission only to the employees table, so I'll be able only to see the employees table. I can open the Lakehouse, and that is it. The only table that appears for me is the employee table, because I only have permission to see this table. Thank you very much for watching and see you next week.